hosting tonight. You and your staff appreciate it, and thanks to everyone here for taking the time to come out tonight. I'm going to walk you through a little bit who Newcastle is, what we do, and tell you a little bit about kind of our vision for these projects in the neighborhood, and pass it along to our design team to walk you through the projects. And we'll be here to answer any questions for you. I'm here tonight with my colleague Kurt Peretz, right here to the left, and we'll be answering a lot of the questions for you tonight. Newcastle, we're a Chicago-based local investment and development firm. We've been around over 20 years. We own and manage nearly 3,000 apartments, and under our Reside Living brand.
Louder, please. Louder.
Is this better? Thank you. All right. We manage nearly 3,000 apartments under our Reside Living brand and 600,000 square feet of urban retail throughout the Chicago neighborhoods. We're long-term investors, and we'll own and manage these projects for decades. The long-term approach allows us to design and operate our assets a little bit differently than most. We'll spend more money on design, materials, landscaping, and security due to our investment horizon. And because we manage our own buildings, I think we'll provide a higher level of service than you'll see at some other properties. In addition to these projects, we have a small retail development underway at the corner of State and Elm. It's a 3-story retail building. And another project that you may be familiar with, our most recent apartment development in the neighborhood, is right across the street here at State and Chestnut, which we developed in 2015. That's a 36-story apartment building. And I note that because I would encourage those that are interested in the type of projects that we do to stop by on your way home tonight and take a look at State and Chestnut. While the design of State and Chestnut, or the design of the buildings we're going to show you tonight, are quite different, I think it'll give you a good understanding of kind of the quality and development that we're going to bring to these projects. We also think it's important to mention kind of our overall vision for this stretch of State Street and Division. These two projects combined with the single-story Lou Malnati's and our 3-story retail development that we have underway at State and Elm gives us a really unique opportunity to plan all these projects at once and allow them to complement each other and bring a different sense of architecture, different scale, different type of retail that we can bring to the neighborhood. We think the diverse mix of building size and architecture is what makes the Gold Coast a unique neighborhood. You have a 50-story building next to a 2-story building. You have old and new, lots of different design, and we feel the combination of the single-story Lou's, the 3-story retail development, the 11-story building, and potentially a 40-story building will keep with the diverse architecture and character of the Gold Coast. We really love this neighborhood. We're committed to quality, and we really think these projects will revitalize this stretch of State Street and Division, bring much needed housing to the market, improve the streetscape, public safety, and will bring a better retail component and more vibrancy to the neighborhood. Lastly, I want to add that we're requesting no zoning changes and no city subsidies will be used for these projects. And that's all I have to say for now, and I'm going to turn it over to Keith Campbell to walk you through the State and Division project, and we'll keep it from there. Thank you.
Wow. Thank you everyone for coming tonight. My name is Keith Campbell. I'm an architect and vice president at the firm of Callison RTKL. For those of you who may not know us, we are a global design practice with offices in 20 major cities around the world. I'm a Chicago architect. I've been practicing here since 1980, and I've led the commercial and multifamily projects in our Chicago office since 1997. Our site is 1200 North State Street, shown here in blue. There. From an urban design standpoint, it's a really interesting site. It's right at the intersection of Gold Coast residential and Division Street nightlife. Projects that are on the site right now, they're all vacant. There's a 3-story building. It used to be B.J. Clark's. There's 2 1-story buildings on State Street. That's what they look like now. But our project is just under 100 units of residential, about 12,000 square feet of retail, 32 parking spaces, and 2 loading berths accessed off of the alley. Historically, Division Street has been primarily a commercial expression. No residential entries on this block of Division. The opposite is true on State Street, where it's primarily residential. So from an urban design standpoint, we find that very dynamic intersection. Our plan here, the ground floor plan, shows a lot of retail exposure on Division. Turns the corner on Division, also with a retail corner here. The residential on North State Street has a much more private, intimate aspect than Division Street, and so we've located our residential entry at the north end of our site here. Access to parking is also at the north side of our site here.
Can you be specific and say what places of Division you are including? So when you're going west, this map doesn't really say anything.
So the building, I'm sorry, can you tell me what you're the building next to the gallery is.
Okay, just for orientation purposes, the building next to the alley right here, outside of our site, is Butch McGuire's.
So did you buy
Shenanigans.
Yeah,
That's shenanigans.
thank you. I think I would like to walk through the entire presentation first before answering any
Well, it doesn't make any sense if we
questions.
don't know what it is that you're talking about.
Let him finish, please.
All right, maybe this will help. At the 3rd level, this is our first residential level, located above our single level of parking. We have the ability to create an outdoor landscaped amenitized terrace above the parking here, which will be accessed by all residents of the building. Some of the west-facing units will have their own private terraces here. And we're providing an amenity and fitness room at the 3rd level, which will also have access to that 3rd level amenity terrace. The typical levels are just like the 3rd level. There's about 13 units per level for 8 levels. This is the roof level where we're providing another hospitality room and outdoor amenity terrace. In section, the building stacks up like this with primarily retail exposure at grade here. Just one single level of parking above that and 8 levels of residential with the roof terrace on top of that. I want to point out that there is just a single level of parking here. It's not a tower on top of a parking podium, and we've taken a lot of care to give the retail excessive height and exposure. We're giving the retailers a little extra height and expression so that no parking will be visible from the street at all. So these are early sketches of our design, and I want to talk a little bit about how we got to where we are with these sketches. This is the Division Street exposure here on the corner where we're showing a lot of retail exposure, vertically oriented storefronts which are typical of the neighborhood. We like giving the corner of State and Division maybe a little extra prominence. There's some kind of subtle moves going on here, but there's just a little plane change here at the corner. We've doubled up the height of the residential bay windows above that corner. That gives it maybe a little extra emphasis and heft, which we like from an urban design point of view. State Street side, it's similar, a little extra emphasis on the corner with these two-level bay windows. These are buildings next to us. These are not part of the site. But scale-wise, we wanted to show how we relate to those buildings. And in this diagram, this is a three-dimensional massing diagram that shows some of the urban design forces that we are responding to with our architectural design. Division Street, this has across these 2 or 3 blocks a pretty consistent 2, 3, 4 level height, which is important for us to recognize, and we're doing so with the height and the proportion of the retail storefronts, as well as a belt course that makes a kind of a subtle distinction between commercial levels and the residential levels above. State Street is a different scale. Part of what makes this site particularly interesting is that the residential buildings, both old and new on State Street, are of a greater height and a greater scale, in some cases much greater than what we're proposing. So we're recognizing the scale and the height of State Street with our building as well. A little more diagrammatic information here. Again, you can see that total elevation on State Street, there's a lot of height differentiation between 3 and 4 level townhouses, a concrete high-rise, 1220 North State Street here. Our building, which tops out at about 121 feet high. There's some other things that we've noticed and we like about the architecture of the neighborhood. Typically, these buildings have a vertically oriented proportion. We like that, and although we're not imitating it, we want to represent that vertical proportion in our building. Another aspect of the context that we're looking at, the ground floor or pedestrian level openings are typically also very vertically oriented. We like the way that in some of the buildings there's a combination of masonry and limestone. It's a historically recognized combination of materials that we too like, and we will include that combination of materials in our building design. On Division Street, you can see this datum line, 2, 3, sometimes 4 level buildings, which is a nice scale. It's an appropriate retail scale. It's something that we also want to recognize as an important design driver for our building. And so the retail exposure, 1200 North State, is consistent with that datum line and consistent in the scale, the proportion of those openings. So here we are, same diagram, only without the Cliff Notes, but you can see that the big variety in scale and height on State Street creates a really interesting, eclectic mix of buildings, building types, and for an architect and an urban designer, that's something that we want to use for design inspiration in our building. A few perspective sketches here to show a little bit of what we're thinking of. This is looking east on Division Street. We're purposely giving a special identity to this part of the building. It is part of our building, but we're giving it a richer masonry expression, sort of a dark purpley iron spot brick combined with limestone trim and accents. We think that helps this building relate more appropriately to the scale of Division Street. Likewise, the scale and proportion of these retail storefronts on the corner are extremely consistent with what historically has been there on the street. Similar view on looking south on State Street here. Excuse me, showing the way our building kind of nestles up to our neighbor 1220 North State Street. We like this building. We, again, like the vertically proportioned openings. We like the combination of stone and masonry. We've emulated some of those proportions in our building, and we've given our residential entry sort of a special identity as a pure masonry plane that's flanked on either side with stone. Here's a sketch of the corner, State Division corner, maybe a half a block south, looking north. And you can see the scale of our building in relation to its neighbors, 1220, and the high rise to the north, as well as low-rise commercial buildings here in the foreground. We like the way that this corner emphasizes that important intersection. We like the way the retailers are relating to their context. Moving back a block south, really showing this building in context with many of its neighbors. You can see the scale of our building, the nature of our building. It's not big enough or tall enough to make a significant mark on the skyline, and that was not our intention. Our intention was to make a significant mark on the streetscape, on the public realm, on the pedestrian experience, and on the neighborhood. So with that, I'd like to close and to introduce